So if you're short on time and you want to know the answer between the Sony to the left and the Hisense to the right, the winner is going to be the Sony. I'm going to explain why in this video and give you some examples as to why, but that's pretty much the short answer. So stay through until the end, smack a like on the video, and with that, let's get started. To the left, we have the Sony A80K. To the right, we have the Hisense U8G. Now, this is going to be a lot closer to what you'd see from the U8H, the brand new model this year. If you want, watch a comparison between the U8G and the U8H to see that they're literally identical, and it ended up being a tie for the most part. But this is a very important comparison, and now I want to draw your attention to the image on the screen right now. If we look, we can see to the left, the Sony is the dimmer picture by far. Now, the brightness advantages are great on the Hisense here, but there's a problem. If you notice, the colors aren't quite as rich, and you almost never really get the richness of color. Now, if you want to replicate this test, if you will, you can pull up this video here. It's called 8K HDR. You see it there, right? It's the Spider-Man 8K HDR, the mirror dimension scene from Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit play here for a second, just let it play out and show you another difference right here. Dark scenes on the A80K can be really dark. And again, if you're not in a dark environment, like you're in a moderately lit room, like I am in here, you're gonna start to see that. And that's essentially gonna make the TV look way, way dimmer than it would look out, obviously, at night. And this is why a lot of people say, you know, OLEDs are just super dim. They can't be utilized the way I want them to. Now, again, it's not like the Sony can't get brighter, but at the same token, it comes as kind of like a double-edged sword. The brighter it gets, the less detail it has, and the less accuracy it has. Also, it tends to push a lot more blue through the channel than what's necessary. Now, I will tell you, the depth is incredible on the Sony, the clarity incredible on the Sony, but the Hisense is pulling through amazingly as we look at it here with all of the detail. Like, I have shadow detail, I have background detail, but not an overabundance of both. Now, if I'm being very honest with you, I would like something in between what the Hisense and what the Sony is doing. I don't like the look of either for this particular scene or example. I think the Hisense is showing way too much shadow detail and it's just way overly bright. And the brightness is turned down to like 28. So there's not really much I could do on the Hisense short of like maybe zeroing it out, but we don't want to do that either. So again, and even in doing that, that doesn't increase the background, the foreground depth perception. So there's no point in really lowering it because it's not going to change the processing. And that's the key here. Sony's processing, their depth technology with the cognitive processor truly does separate the foreground from the background. Like, as I look at it, I can see Spider-Man's shoulders as clearly and distinctly as I would if I were like maybe there in person versus the Hisense where that just doesn't happen. And this is where you get to the difference between budget processing and higher end processing. Now, again, the OLED is again going to look really dim, but that's just kind of how these things have to work out. Again, and I want to show this off because like a lot of people always wonder about these two things, but it's huge. Now I want to show you this as well. Now I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but in scenes like this, if you put this movie in, the Hisense is going to exhibit a haze that's just generally unappealing, and particularly the color blue never really gets accurate at all. I've tried every which way from Sunday, and I could not get the blue to look anywhere near as good as it does on the Sony A80K. So that's just something that sucks. Now, counteractively, the Sony A80K doesn't have as much of the finer details that I would have in terms of just not being so dark and dim, comparatively to the color volume and the range of color and the dynamic range overall from having that extra brightness to hit all the in-between shades of gray to open up those darker black levels, so that's one of the things that having a brighter screen can benefit you from, because again, if you have more brightness to throw behind something like the color gray, that's going to extend that shade of gray to a different shade. And this is where we start veering off into a little bit more of the color theory aspect of display science, but it's not necessary. In English, one's brighter, one's dimmer, and the dimmer one can be seen as dimmer, you know what I mean? And I think that's really what we should keep in mind here when we start talking about LED versus OLED and its place on the market. Now, I want to also point out the fact that even though this is a WOLED, it's still hanging in there really well with quantum dot technology. I want to show you this scene here. This is where OLED really truly shines the greatest out of everything, because if you look I mean, like, yes, the Hisense is brighter, but the image is crap. I'll be very blunt about that comparatively to what I have on the A80K here, because the A80K is rendering perfect, not perfect, but ideal color. Way more realistically, it's a darker shade of blue like it's supposed to be. You have the little gem or whatever that is, his little spell in the middle there. That looks incredible. His jacket looks great. Facial details through the roof. Hisense just doesn't really have anything outside of ambient light coming in around things like the hands. The face is really bright, but bright isn't what I'm always after. But again, I'm not here to tell you that your preference is incorrect or whatever the case may be. I'm just here to give my take on what I'm seeing and kind of let you know these differences. So if you're on the fence between one or the other, like let's say you're like, should I buy a U8H, for example, or the A80K? It's really going to come down to a couple different factors. If you like brightness and you like color volume that kind of casts across the whole screen, this is going to be the better TV hands down all day, every day. But if you like details and you like accuracy, then you're going to go for something like this. It's not necessarily the brighter of the two TVs. So, you know, that's one of those things that you have to keep in mind. I personally really like the look of the Sony way more than the Hisense for this particular example. However, there is something interesting that does happen, and there is a bit of a shift that does tend to happen, and I want to show you guys what that shift is, okay? So in this scene, look at how bad Sony's motion is comparatively to the Hisense. That was just terrible, that whole sequence. And when you get to action scenes like this, particularly this, okay? I'm going to play it again. Okay, now I want you to watch very carefully, okay? I'm even gonna lower down, I'm gonna lower down my ISO. Maybe that'll help you guys see it. I don't know, maybe I'm just being crazy here, but I'm gonna try to lower down my ISO to a point where you guys can really see every little detail, okay? And now we're going to go ahead and hit play. I want you to watch carefully the movement as Spider-Man trails across, and slow it down in YouTube, under playback in their options to like 0.25, and seriously look at how bad all of the motion is on the Sony, okay? Here we go. I mean, it's literally terrible. And this is where now we have a conversation to have here. So yes, Sony, and I've said this for years now. I've been saying this since about, honestly, the Sony A9G from like 2019, okay? Sony is really great when things are still. So if you're somebody that has like a gallery fetish and you want to maybe like use your TV as a gallery TV exclusively, go for it. This is a great TV for that. I mean, maybe not this particular one because it does have a whole hell of a lot of image retention, not burn-in. Image retention is very easily acquired on the A80K. Don't know if I've mentioned that, but it definitely is there. Like even after just like a couple minutes of a tile being up on the Xbox home menu or something like that, it shows like very prominently. So very, very apparently, by the way. So keep that in mind. But again, I want to kind of point this out though. Sony's great for stills, okay? But when motion starts happening, things start moving, Sony's artifacts are at this point legendary. And not for a good reason. They look really bad, it's really jarring, and it feels like you bought a really cheap budget level TV. I mean, it's so bad. I mean, let's run this back again, okay? Not for dramatic effects, so that you can see what I am talking about. It is bad. It's fundamentally just terrible. It's broken in every way quantifiable. Like, that's terrible motion. Now, these are the kinds of movies, when I say, hey guys, Sony's motion is bad, you hear every so-called expert say, oh no, Sony's motion is good. This is what I mean when I say it's bad motion. I'm not talking about a test pattern that was like, in-home built, behind closed doors, they tested it, or maybe they're using some website to test it, to get refresh rates or all that crap. I'm talking about real world content you own right now, right? A Spider-Man movie, No Way Home. Put it in. Play the scene. You'll see it. Anytime that kind of action happens where there's twirling and moving and physics involved and the world and things like that, where there are particle effects and all that stuff popping off on the screen, Sony's do not look good. And they have not for years, and I have been the only person to really call Sony on this so that it gets fixed. But it's I guess, interpreted as I just hate Sony and I'm just here to bash them because of whatever reason people make up. But there is a conversation to be had there. Like, you're paying, in some cases, like, for example, the A95K, thousands upon thousands of dollars for that TV. And the motion is horrible. And this is actually better motion, by the way, than the Sony A95K. So the A95K, their flagship model, would be even worse than what you just saw. Let that sink in. And I have been hitting this drum as hard as I can to make you aware, so like you know the differences between the two. So now this is where, like, yes, the Hisense is a budget TV, but now we've really got to weigh up our options, right? Okay, so we know now the Sony is crap for motion. Anytime something's moving really fast, like in an action movie like Spider-Man No Way Home, well, we're gonna have problems. Well, that's not ideal for everybody who likes that kind of content. So yeah, the picture is far superior than this so-called budget TV that we have on the Hisense, but now we're starting to see where Hisense is pulling ahead. They have the better motion and they have the better brightness, which gives us more details in our shadows in the darkest scenes. So movies like Harry Potter, not gonna be crushed out or as dim as they would be on something like the Sony. And in a brighter room, in a brighter environment, not even that bright, by the way, like the room I'm in right now, the advantages can be seen, and as well as the disadvantages, as you saw earlier on in the video. So it gets to this part where we do this back and forth, right? And we start finding differences and weaknesses, and that's where we have to call it where it is. But I mean, I don't even have to play an entire comparison for you to know, like, the Sony has the better picture quality, but that's kind of like where it stops a bit for me, because yes, the sound is better, the picture is better, but in my opinion, that doesn't change the fact that, like, the most important aspect of a TV when things are moving, I mean, hello, motion picture, the motion is bad. And I think motion should be the number one thing any TV manufacturer strives for. And after striving for that, then you should strive for all the other stuff. Because if your motion is trash, but you do what Sony does and gives gorgeous picture quality, it's pointless because your motion is fundamentally broken. Now, again, there are people that can try to argue this every which way from Sunday, and we're not here to do that. But I just wanted to show you a real example with real content so that you could replicate it yourself. And by all means, ask anyone out there to test this video right here, okay? The A80K HDR. The Mirror Dimension, Spider-Man, No Way Home, Dolby whatever it is. It's from the channel 4K Clips and Trailers. And you'll see it. It'll be there as evidently and as clear as day. Okay, so let's talk color. The first thing you're going to notice is that Sony is better at hitting more in-between shades, and color paletry-wise, it is just the stronger variation of color. And this is an important distinction to note because the Hisense line of televisions, the U8G particularly, and higher, they're using quantum dot filtering. That's huge because this is not using that. So you could imagine how much better that kind of picture quality would be with something like the A95K versus this and that aspect. But then again, not always, because sometimes Sony purposely washes out color for the more film-esque or more cinematic, as it's called, look. Anytime you hear the word cinematic, 9 times out of 10, people are talking about a muted color paletry, which again draws out more detail, but that doesn't mean more realism or more vibrancy like you would see in the real world. It just means dulling out those visual acuities that you would have, so that again it gives a look, if you will. So that's not necessarily my thing, but again, everybody's gonna have their preference. I would say right now in this particular moment, Hisense is giving the more cinematic look, right? Because it's not really as colorful, it's dull. It's dulling out those colors a little bit more, where Sony is more vibrant and more punchy and it's giving you more of the real world look. So, I mean, obviously I'm going for that, preferentially anyway. Now, as it kind of moves past, again, both colors are good, but you can clearly see, I mean, just look at how much more intense the color is on the Sony than on the Hisense. Hisense is not able to match that same level of vibrancy and color purity. But again, it's going to be like tomato. It's going to depend on what you're looking at. I know sometimes it can change pretty aggressively, and other examples, like I know like blue is one of those colors, yellow. I mean, like it really just does depend. Like they do trade blows, but again, it's ultimately going to depend on what you watch. But more often than not, it's pretty much going to be a win for the Sony. I mean, look at this flower right now. Like, look at the detail in this flower. Hisense ain't bad, right? It's not like, holy shit, run from the Hisense. But look at the darkness inside the petals. Like, that cognitive processor is slaying Sony right now. Like, or is Sony is slaying the Hisense right now in every way imaginable. And this is where I get a little salty, because it's like I look at all this stuff, I mean, like, and I start to feel a type of way. But now here's where they kind of trade again, okay? And it's not to say that the red is terrible, okay? It's not the worst red I've ever seen. I'm sure many people will look at that red on the Sony and go, wow, that's red. But on the Hisense, it's that pure red, that ruby rich red, that beautiful, just glorious red. That, my friends, is the biggest difference that I've seen so far, like color-wise, that the A80K just does not have, and that's where not having the quantum dots hurts the A80K versus helping it. But I suspect within the next couple of years, as quantum dot OLEDs take off and become more popular and people start falling in love with them, I'm telling you right now, when this becomes a normal thing, you're going to see what I mean, and more people are going to be able to compare and see, wow, yeah, those reds are a little bit more orange. Yeah, I'm saying it right now. I've been saying it for years, since forever, really, about OLEDs, since like 2017. Their reds are not red. And it's the WOLED technology exclusively. They've made improvements on things like LG's with the C1, but honestly speaking, typically WOLED does not do a great job with the red. It is a massive, massive problem. And even the C1, when you compare it against something like this, it just doesn't do very well. So yeah, the color red, can't stress it enough. So now let's show some more content here and go through some more of the key colors that we look for. So we know blues are going to go to the Sony. Yellows surprisingly went to the Sony. Reds went to the Hisense. Greens are hit or miss. They can be a tie depending on what you're looking at. In this particular example, the magenta is going to go to the Hisense. Hisense is doing a brilliant job producing that magenta, where Sony struggles with purples. And this is in line with what I've been talking about, even in my review of the A95K, where I was mentioning, hey, listen, guys, the purples are just not accurate. They're way too blue. And you're going to find that also being a recurring problem with Sony. Those are their big problem colors right now, red and purple. They don't reproduce those like they need to be reproduced, and they need to go back to the drawing board there. So again, it's going to depend preferentially on, like, even right down to like your favorite color. Like if one of your favorite colors is magenta, you're probably going to want to go with the Hisense, because every time you see it on the Sony, it's not going to be correct. Same thing for red. If you really love when reds are rich and pure and real, then you're going to go with something like the Hisense versus the Sony, where they just get it wrong, and you can definitely feel that they're wrong and that they're off. Especially like if you watch YouTube, right, and you're looking at the little bar at the bottom, it's almost orange at the bottom. Like literally pull up YouTube and you'll see what I'm talking about. The bar is almost orange by comparison. Now, this is not an invitation for people who like to use cell phones to try to show like a super juiced up, you know, secondhand footage. Like, you have to see it in person, right? And I also want to point out, like, even everything I'm showing you here, it can't 100% replicate what TVs are doing. It's just a recording of a television, and so you really need to follow this commentary. I can't stress it enough. But yeah, no, it's one of those things for sure. So I think all in all, though, if we want to be very realistic and very honest about the winner of this result, I would have to say I would give the win to the Sony A80K without question, due to the clarity and the details and the overall color. However, motion is a massive problem, and that's where Hisense becomes a heavy argument. But in terms of picture quality, there can be no doubt that the A80K is just the winner. But again, I would still want Sony to fix that motion. I would really hope we would have a conversation about that, but I do ultimately give the win to them for that. Or at least for the overall picture quality. So that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty, and until the next video, I'll see you guys later.